Hey there, so by the end of this video, you'll have this ChatGPT backed application that can take in any YouTube video URL. It takes your API key, and you can ask any question from within that YouTube video, and it will respond with an answer. So I am going to open up my IDE. Now I have an empty directory over here, and I'm going to create my first file. We are going to code the front end first of all. So for that, I am going to create a new file. I'm going to call this front end.py. Okay, now we're going to be using a Streamlit library to code the front end. Import Streamlit as st. Okay, and just to show you a quick demo, let me write a title. st.title, give it a name, chat with YouTube video. Okay, now in order to run this application, we need to open up the terminal, write streamlit, run, and then the name of the file, which is frontend.py. Okay, and it's going to open up our web page, right? Now I want to add a little bit of customization to this page. I want to add a text box over here so that the user can ask a question. I want to add a sidebar to this page and add a bit of design to this, and option to add video URL and OpenAI API key. So I'm gonna add those now. First of all, let me just quickly set the page configuration. Set page configuration. First of all, I'm going to give it a page title. Let's just call it YouTube GPT. I'm going to define the layout to be white for now. Okay, what this actually does is if I save this, go back and reload, um, it adds a title to our web page, right? And the layout white simply means that the layout stretches over the whole screen. If I define layout to be centered, go back, you can see that the layout becomes centered. But for now, I just want it to be wide. Um, Reload, and I am now going to add an option for the user to ask question. So we're going to do that with st.text input and ask question below. Let's just say that. And if I go back reload, we now have an option where user can enter their question about the YouTube video, right? Let's suppose the user asks a question, my question, and once they press enter, we actually want to save this question so that way we can use it in the while processing later on. So I am going to create a variable to store this question. Right now, what's going to happen is once the user enters the question, it's going to be stored inside of this variable, and then we can use it later on, right, by calling this variable. After this, I want to add a sidebar to this page, and I'm going to do that with st.sidebar. Right, let's just add a subheader for now. Enter your OpenAI API key below, right? And if I save this, go back, reload, we now have a sidebar with a subheader, right? We're going to use the same text box to create an option over here. I can do st.text input, call it, let's just say, OpenAI API key, enter OpenAI API key below, right? And we can also give it a placeholder. So let me call it OpenAI API key, right? We now have a placeholder inside of here. We can give this one a placeholder as well. Let me write placeholder equals your question here. Okay, go back, reload. We now have a placeholder here as well. And now the user has the option to add the API key over here. Now we want to add two small changes over here, but similar to this one, once the user enters the API key, we want to store that, so that way we can use it later on. So I am going to create a variable for that. Let's just call it API underscore key, right? And secondly, once the user enters the API key, I want it to be hidden, so that way the other person is not able to see this. We can do that by defining the type of this in text input box. If I define the type to be password, save this and reload, you can see that if the user enters the API key this time around, the other person will not be able to see, okay, unless they press the eye icon, right? So this is perfect for now for our use case. Now below this, I want to create an option to add the YouTube video URL, right? So let's do that. It'll be similar to this one, this box. So let's just add a URL. Once again, I'm creating a variable because I need to save this URL. We're going to use that later on. So st.text input, enter YouTube URL below, right? And I'm going to give this one a placeholder as well. URL paste URL here. Let's just call it that. Right, if I go back and reload this, we have this over here where the user can paste their URL, enter, and it will be saved inside of the variable over here. Okay, now this is getting a bit too repetitive. Enter your OpenAI API key over here as well. So I'm just going to remove this for now. No need for subheader. Okay, reload. There we go. And just for a bit of design, I can add an image over here. I created one on Canva which I can download. So this one I can download PNG format. Okay, and open this up. Actually, bring it over here. Let me just call it image.png. Open up my Visual Studio Code. Bring this inside of my IDE, and I can actually add this image using st.image. Give it the file name, because we do not this is in the same directory, so we don't need to add the file path. We only need to give it the name image.png. Now if no need for this one over here this time around. If I save this and go back to uh, the web page, reload this, we now have the image over here. It's actually not perfect. There's a bit of the PNG file was not supposed to add these corners, but it'll do for this tutorial. Okay, so we now have the basic design of our application ready. Now the user can ask a question over here, and we know that it will be saved inside of this question, and then the user can enter their API key, and we know that it will be saved inside of API underscore key, right? And the user can enter the URL, the video URL over here, and it will be saved inside of the URL, right? So with that, let's just move towards coding the backend. Let me actually uh, move this to here. Before that, I am actually going to create a function for this, so I can just select all of this and indent it, define a function, let me just name the function as front end, right? And what I'm going to do below this is if underscore underscore name equals underscore underscore main, I am going to call this function. Okay, if I save this, go back and reload. So yeah, everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And now we are going to move towards coding the backend of this application. And backend is going to contain the computational process that sends the request to OpenAI and gets the response from that. So right now, if the user asks any question, let's just say what is in this video, and they provide a video URL over here, press enter. Obviously, nothing is going to happen because we haven't defined the process yet. So we're going to do that now. And before that, we can just for now close this application, clear this, just close this, and I'm going to create a file that will contain the backend, the computational process of my application. So I'm going to call it backend.py. Right, inside of here we need to import quite a few libraries. Import OS, and then from Langchain.llms we are going to import our large language model, which will be OpenAI. Okay, and then we are going to import something that will be necessary for loading up the YouTube video, which so for that we are going to do from Langchain dot document loaders import YouTube loader. Okay, and then from Langchain dot embeddings we are going to import OpenAI embeddings. This is what we are going to be using to create embeddings of our files, which is necessary to store the information inside of a vector database. We can also import the uh, vector database from Langchain dot vector stores. We can import you can import any vector store. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to use Chroma. Okay, and then once we import we load up the document, we need to split that as well. So from Langchain dot text splitter we are going to import recursive character text splitter. Okay, and then in order to ask the questions and get an answer, we are going to do from Langchain dot change dot what different chains do we have over here? Not summarization. We actually need to add a question answering chain. We are going to import load QA chain. Okay, I think that is pretty much it. That is all that we need. So with that, we are going to start coding our backend. Okay, and I am going to define a process for this one as well, just to keep things a bit standard. I'm going to call it a computational process. You can name it whatever you want. Now, this computational process is going to take three things. First of all, it is going to take in the API key, right? And secondly, it's going to take the URL of the video. And lastly, it is going to take the user question, so that way it can find an answer to that question. Okay, we're going to use these terms inside of the definition below. For now, let me first of all just initialize our large language model. um, Initialize LLM. Okay, and I'm going to do OpenAI API key equals API key. Okay, so once it gets this argument, it's going to use that inside of the function, and then we need to give this to os.environment os.environment OpenAI API key. We actually need to keep this outside of this equals API key. Okay, and then we are going to initialize our large language model, which will be OpenAI. So large language model equals OpenAI, and we are going to give it a temperature of 0, which means this just defines the randomness. How different is the answer each time the user asks the same question? It's going to provide a different answer. And then we are going to define the API key, which we just defined over here, OpenAI API key. Okay, we can simply keep it API key as well, but let's just keep it this way. And now we are going to load our YouTube video. So we are going to define a loader variable, and this is going to use YouTube loader method and YouTube loader a class and its method load, and it is going to take as an argument the URL of the video. Okay, and then we are going to on this loader we are going to apply the load method on itself, and the results that it gets we are going to store that, let's just say, in a result variable. Okay, now once we have the loaded uh, document, we need to split that up into chunks. So for that we are going to define a text splitter variable where we are going to initialize our recursive character text splitter. So recursive character text splitter, we want to define a chunk size which will be 1000, and then chunk overlap, we can give it a bit of overlap, we can also keep it 0, but let's just give it an overlap of 100. Okay, and then we are going to use this recursive character text splitter to split the loaded documents into chunks. So let's define a variable called chunks, right? And it will be text splitter dot split documents of the result. So it's going to take the documents which we defined inside of the result. Okay, after this we want to once we have the chunks, we want to create embeddings uh, and store those inside of a vector data store. So for embeddings we are going to define OpenAI embeddings, which we imported over here. So OpenAI embeddings, for this we need to provide the API key, not based, we need to provide the key as we defined over here, OpenAI API key, or we can simply keep it API key as well. And we are going to use this now. So chroma, which we imported is our vector store dot from documents, and we are going to provide it as an argument the things that it wants to create embeddings of and store, which in our case is the chunks that we created. So chunks, okay, and embeddings equals embeddings. Okay, and we are going to store this information, the result that this gets inside of a variable which I'm just going to call database, and then we are going to run this, not actually run this but use a similarity search on this against the question that the user asks. So in this case we need to provide it a query which will be the question. Okay, and let's just store this inside of docs, right? And then we are going to use this load QA chain. Let's just initialize this with our large language model as the large language model that we created over here, OpenAI, and let me just call it read chain. Okay, and now we are going to run this read chain dot run. Okay, and we are going to provide it with the document, which in our case is docs, right? And the question is question which the user sent as an input. Okay, and this is actually going to provide us with an answer which we can store inside of answer, and this answer is what we are finally going to return with this function. So it's going to return the answer. Okay, now this API key, this URL and question is coming from the front end, obviously the one that the user is inputting inside of the front end, and then we are passing them through a couple of processes to load them into create embeddings and load them into OpenAI, and then have ChatGPT understand them and find the answer to any question that is contained within that within the scope of that video. Right now we are going to import this inside of our front end, so we are going to do from back end, we are going to import the computational process that we defined, right? And once again, this is the computational process, the definition that we gave to our function. And once we have all of this information, now here we actually want to ensure that we have this information before this computational process takes place. Otherwise, it's going to happen right when the app loads. So for that, we are going to do if URL and API key is not none, right? Only then we are going to uh, import the computational process, right? Uh, to take it a step further, we can also do if question. This ensures that all three of these things are present before the computational process takes place and the request to OpenAI goes, right? In that case, we are simply going to call the function computational process, and as an argument, we are going to provide this it the informations that user inputted inside of our front end. So for the API key, user entered the API key, we stored it over here inside of API key, right? Once user entered. So for API key is API key, the one that user entered. And for our URL, let's just see, the user entered the URL over here inside of the front end, and we stored it inside of URL. So for the URL, we are going to add URL. And for the question, finally, the user entered the question over here and we stored it inside a question, so it is also going to be simply question. Okay, and now this computational process is going to take place with this information that the user inputted inside of the front end, and it's going to give us an answer with let us store it, let's just say, as ANS answer, and then we are going to simply st.write the answer. Okay, now this should be working perfectly fine. Now let me actually load up the terminal and write streamlit run frontend.py. Okay, we have our front end working fine. Now let me actually enter the API key and then we'll proceed with the rest of the video. Okay, so I have entered my API key over here, and I am now simply going to go to YouTube. Let me find a video. Lex Friedman on switching from C++ to Python. Let me just copy the URL and enter this over here. Press enter, and it should have now stored this inside of the respective variables, right? Now let me ask you a question. uh, what does Lex say about C++? Okay, string object has no attribute video ID. All right, so let's see where we have the. Okay, so I actually found the error, and it was I was actually using a wrong method inside of here. So it should be the method that we need to be using over here is YouTube loader dot from YouTube URL. Okay, so I'm gonna save this, go back, reload, enter the API key, and then I am going to paste the same URL once again. Let me just copy this and paste it over here, press enter, and let me ask the same question once again. What does Lex say about C++? Okay, and this time it's actually sending a request, and we need to wait for a while, and there we go, we have our answer. Okay, so we have the perfectly working web app over here. um, Once again, this is the working code, this is the backend. The mistake was over here, which was fixed. Then we have this front end. um, Quick little tip, if I want to add a little bit more design to here, let's just say a bit more color to this one, I can do that by coming to the front end and chat with YouTube video. I can actually add the color red like this to this YouTube part. Right, control save this, go back, reload, and there we have it in red color. Okay, and I can add other colors to this as well, to any text wherever I want. So that's pretty much it, the whole working app. Hope you had a fun time watching this, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and peace out.